Let's welcome our next panel, Israel, the Startup Nation 2.0, featuring David Oviezer, Chairman Metabomet and Front Biopharma, Associate Professor Adjunct at Bar-Ilan University, Anya Eldon, Vice President of Innovation Authority and Head of Startup Division, Leah Clapper, Chief Technology Officer at Futurex, Yane Ofran, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Biologic Design, Ofer Shapira, Chief Executive Officer, Eitaeda Research and Development, the Weizmann Institute of Science. Our session leader is Julian Adams, Chief Executive Officer, Gamida Cell.
So good day, everyone. My name is Julian Adams, and I'm the panel host for this session. I want to thank WuXi for enabling this, what I think is going to be a very exciting discussion over the next hour or so. And I'm joined by very distinguished Israeli scientists and entrepreneurs. And we want to talk about the Israel Startup Nation 2.0, which is what has happened in the Israel ecosystem in terms of medicine and technologies that support the eventual treatment of patients and understanding the unmet needs in medicine. So I would like to just maybe make a few opening comments. Israel has been a beacon of innovation. There have been about 1,400 companies that have been established over the past years. So there's a very healthy ecosystem, not just limited to therapeutics, but also diagnostics, digital health, healthcare IT. So a complete repertoire of opportunities to eventually improve the practice of medicine through innovation. So I'm joined here by, as I said, by a distinguished panel. I'd like to introduce Anya Eldon from the Israel Innovation Authority. Anya, please do introduce yourself and talk about sort of the role of the Israel Innovation Authority and the philosophy that you are undertaking.
Thank you, Julian, and great to be here. Thank you, WuXi, for asking me. So my name is Anya Eldon. I'm Vice President at the Israel Innovation Authority. We're a government agency fully funded by the government. It's about $500 million US a year. About 1/3 of our money is spent on life sciences. That includes both therapeutics and diagnostics, and digital health has been a strong player in the last few years. And the way we operate, we actually encourage risk. So our philosophy is we as a government want to be the highest risk taker. We want to invest in the most advanced, risky, disruptive endeavors in order to enable the private sector to invest in such ventures. So it's a little different approach, I guess, than others. So we're looking for innovation. Our mission is economic development, economic success through innovation. And normally we will support companies that come to us from every area. But once in a while, we feel that there is a need for intervention when there is a huge opportunities awaiting. And I wanted to say a few words about BioConvergence, our next national program that's being put in place together. And we think, if you think of Israel, everybody knows Israel because of our very successful high-tech tech environment. $10 billion were invested last year. Most of it went into tech. So we think that bioconvergence and actually the future of medicine is going to be our next growth engine. We think that within 10 years, bioconvergent medicine can become as big as tech. And that's why the government is putting money and effort and emphasis around this. So if you want me to go deeper in bioconvergence, I can do it maybe later on.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Anya. I want to next turn to Ofer Shapira, who is the CEO of Eitaeda, the technology licensing arm for the Weizmann Institute. Please introduce yourself and talk about your philosophy and your mission as well.
Yeah, thank you, and thank WuXi for inviting me. Yes, my background is I'm at Eitaeda, which is the commercialization arm of the Weizmann Institute. My background is in entrepreneurship, so I have been experienced the other side of the chain as well. And you said before that I represent the first step. I think the TTOs represent even the earlier step, because we are dealing with the researchers that usually doing the fundamental science, and we try to find out within this which of the fundamental science researchers can get into something that it's commercializable or can turn out into a drug or into a medical device and so on, and then to take it off to the market. I think we are getting a lot of help from the Israel Innovation Authority and connection with VC, and our philosophy right now is, I think that the point of equilibrium between industry and licensing has changed a bit from past years. There's more need to grow companies just before they get into the big giants, the pharma, or license them out. And we are trying to build entities around the inventions, helping them get on the ground and mature enough to be interesting, either to continue grow on their own or to be part of a larger organization. So our main challenge, I think, or our main that facing us is take the fundamental science, helping it cross what we call the gap between the fundamental and the first step as a commercial entity. Once it's there, we're letting it go to the normal route of raising money and so on.
Thank you. And I have three serial entrepreneurs. I'm going to start with David Oviezer. Maybe you can talk about your perspective and what you're doing, and how have you interacted both with the technology offices as well as the Israel Innovation Authority.
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Julian, for hosting, and thank you, WuXi, for inviting me to this conference. I'm David Oviezer. I'm a scientist by training. Spent most of my career as a CEO of a company named BayHelix, who brought a drug for rare diseases, for Gaucher's disease, through FDA approval, and I took the company public as well. Currently, I am chairman, not CEO, of a company named Metabomed, who is focused on cancer metabolism. And in addition, I'm a chairman of a company named Front Biotechnology, that is an immunotherapy startup stemming out of technology coming from the Weizmann Institute. The core technology used in Metabomed was licensed from academic institutes such as Tel Aviv University, the Technion in Haifa, and additional academic institutions. Working with the TTOs, I think, is a key for starting a company, so they have a basic technology. And I think looking at the TTOs as a partner is really the key for establishing the early stage for the technology of the company. Having them understand what we want to do, and having them as partners both on the upside and going forward. Recently, we have a recent experience with another company, Front Biopharma, that is based on technology out of the Weizmann Institute, and working together with them is again in the same spirit. Let's do things together so we can maximize the potential that is locked in this academic technology and turn it into a viable commercial entity for the benefit of the patients that will really be the ones who need these new technologies for treating their different diseases and disorders. From the financial aspect, and I think here is where the Innovation Authority kicks in. I've been lucky to work with the Innovation Authority for many years as CEO of BayHelix. I was even luckier to be one of the few biotech companies who actually paid back some of the fundings that we got in the form of royalty. And I really believe that working together with the authority that is willing to take the risk at the early stages of development enables young companies such as the ones we were and are today in different startups, and enables them to close a very difficult gap of risk. It's not enough. It's only really, it's a jump start, but it's a very important tool in moving these companies forward.
And so we'll also then turn to Leah Clapper. Maybe Leah, you can introduce yourself and talk about your philosophy and vision.
Sure, happy to. So thank you, Julian. My name is Leah Clapper. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Futurex, and we're a biopharmaceutical accelerator within the incubator program supported by the Israel Innovation Authority. And our partners are J&J, Eitaeda, OrbiMed, and Bayer, all through their venture arms. And our mission is to bridge the gap that Ofer mentioned, which is taking very early stage programs in biotech and pharma and trying to develop them through understanding both the innovative science as well as the requirements of the industry, trying to help them evolve towards the collaboration with pharma companies and towards growing into developed biotech companies. So all of our programs, and we currently have 12 in our accelerator, are very early stage. We look at real innovation, trying to find those programs that can really make a difference for the patients. So we look at new targets, we look at new technologies, at new platforms, trying to bring innovative ideas into the industry way of looking at pharmaceuticals. We have programs in cell therapy, we have small molecules, we have antibodies, we have synthetic biology platforms. So a very wide array of programs. And our philosophy is that if you find that excellent science and know to bring it towards what industry is looking for and identify the killer experiments, the go, no-go decisions, identify where the need is for the patients, for the payers, we can accelerate those programs and save a lot of time and investment by focusing on the right way of developing them. We have established 23 companies to date. Some of them have graduated and created companies that have been able to fund themselves beyond the time in the accelerator. And I think that is our real goal, to build independent companies with innovative therapies for patients.
And let me turn to Yanai Ofram, who is the CEO of Biologic Design. Please introduce yourself, give us a picture of what you're up to.
Thank you. So, I'm a scientist. I'm a computational biophysicist by training, and I have been a professor here in Israel for over a decade. In parallel to building my academic lab, I founded Biologic Design initially as a privately funded enterprise within my lab, with the goal of using AI combined with protein engineering to design clever antibodies. this company has developed a very strong platform for designing antibodies. And about 3 years ago, we raised money from VC and left the university and started operating like an independent company. In parallel, by the way, about 3 years ago, I founded another company also that emerged from the technologies that were developed in my research using, again, AI and protein engineering in order to engineer proteins in food to make them safer and healthier. So for example, we design gluten to maintain its function, but be safe for people with celiac disease and other gluten sensitivity. We design allergy triggering proteins like peanut proteins to make them not just safe, but also to make them tolerizing so they can help patient overcome their allergy and sensitivity. And just at the end of last year, just a few months ago, I founded or co-founded a company that was spun off biologic design called Alus Biosciences, and it takes one of the antibodies we designed, or a family of antibodies we designed, into clinical trials to treat cancer through a novel idea of harnessing certain cytokines to attack the tumors. Just over the last few months, these three companies together raised more than 100 million combined to take their programs further and into the clinic. And in all programs, we started with scientific ideas that married, if you will, computational sciences, biochemistry, immunology, and cell biology in order to utilize capabilities of each of these fields to create new therapeutics.
Thank you. It occurs to me that Lee Hood coined the term systems biology about 2 decades ago. And it sounds like now biology, chemistry, and now physics has entered and IT have converged. And so, Anya, I'd like to hear more about the bioconvergence philosophy. Maybe you can elaborate more on how we can learn from different disciplines to enable a more rapid pace of discovery and problem solving in the biomedical industry, the life sciences industry.
Thank you, Julian. So as you said, bioconvergence is a convergence of biology with other real science disciplines. So you and I talked about AI and physics, and it could be nanomaterials, it could be other engineering. And the idea is that the future medicines will be much more precise. The therapy will be applied to the right place at the right time. If it has to go around our body looking for trouble and then release the drug at the right time when the problem is identified, that could be, there is actually a company that's developing such a nanorobot. If it's 3D printing and cyber tissue engineering, there is an Israeli company called Precise Bio that's developing this and already printing cells for cell therapy. It could be bioengineered nanorobotics, it could be genetic engineers, and of course, therapeutic discovery. So the first stage is what you and I just described. When you take a computational biology or computational physics or chemistry, when you take the hypothesis, biological hypothesis, and you apply AI to it, then you have the bioconvergence. McKinsey just published a report last year that said that within 10 years, the bioengineering, bioconvergence market will be $4 trillion. And about half of the therapeutic problems are going to be solved by bioconvergent, bioengineered solutions. So we have a big opportunity. And the reason we are so keen on it at the government is Israel has been traditionally very successful in multidisciplinary solutions. So if you think of given imaging, those are the type of solutions that we excel. We have great engineering, we have very good life sciences. It's putting them together with AI, which is definitely a very strong thing in Israel. All of those combined together, we think this is a strength for Israel. This is where companies can be developed. And I think the exciting thing about the story, and I just told you, is that you were asking, are the companies going to be sold or technology is going to be sold early on? And here's Yanai saying, I started as an academic invention. I raised some money. I think we're at this stage, especially around this BioConvergence, where we can build great companies in Israel. And apparently there is funding to be had. So Yanai can talk about funding, Leah can talk about funding, and David can talk about funding, Metabomed. So that's why we're so excited. We think this is a growth engine for Israeli economy.
So funding, it's the enabling asset that allows us to build on these innovative ideas. Leah, can you talk about how were you able to get to the venture arm to participate in the very earliest stages of a company's life cycle?
So I think some of the credit here is to the Israel Innovation Authority. I'm sure Anya knows Futurex from its early days, when the Israel Innovation Authority required that this tender be in collaboration with big pharma players, because we know how difficult it is to develop new pharmaceuticals and also to raise capital for pharmaceuticals at very early stages. And the interest was in early stage innovative breakthrough therapies. So it was clear that we required the assistance of big pharma and venture capitals. And that's when Orbimed came in and brought the venture arm of J&J and the venture arm of Eitaeda. And I think that what they identified here in Israel is both innovation as well as the innate ability of Israeli scientists and the local startup companies to look at these projects in a very focused and identify the shortcuts that are there to accelerate these programs towards therapies. So that is how the whole idea of Futurex began. And as I mentioned, we identify the programs whether they're new targets or new platforms. We sometimes begin with companies that are an idea on a napkin. So we have a few examples of companies that began as ideas or very, very early stage. One of the first companies that graduated out of Futurex is Biomics, that develops phage therapies for diseases that involve microbiome. So the first stage is identifying these diseases, identifying the bacteria that are involved in these diseases. This is a program coming out from the Weizmann Institute, and it arrived at the incubator at a very, very early stage and was graduated after a mere 2 years, raising Series A of $28 million. And I think a good example of how we can accelerate the development of such innovative programs by identifying the need and going straight to the goal as fast as possible, with the help of our investors, with the help of the right consultants. This is a great success, and we're hoping for a few more.
Julian, if I may add a point about the financing, which is a necessity we all have to deal with in drug development. For instance, in Metabomed, we have a very unique blend of several corporate VCs, Pfizer and Merck and Boehringer Ingelheim, together with some pure Israeli excellence VCs. And recently we brought in a prominent Chinese-based investor as well. So I think the combination of a broad base of investors who all have different interests and aspects on one hand, but all share the passion of bringing in new drugs for the benefit of patients. And that's, at the end of the day, what we're all about. That makes the initial funding relatively challenging, but possible. On the other hand, moving forward into the more complex and expensive clinical trials and manufacturing does require a different magnitude of financing. And we still are, at the end of the day, dependent on strong US capital markets that will enable us both privately and publicly bring in the amount of funding needed for a smaller company to take their drug into clinical trials and eventually get it approved and be able to provide it to the patients subsequently.
So it leads me to ultimately you need a management team. So Ofer, how do you think about that vis-a-vis the Weizmann Institute? You know, what makes a good, scientific publication comes from great work in the lab, but how do you translate that work? How do you identify the right management team to initiate, to nucleate these startup ideas?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, because I think that's the most challenging part, is to find a good entrepreneur that can take an idea and start driving it off. Because as you all know, you can be a great scientist and have a wonderful ideas and wonderful research, but to take it into a commercial is a completely different game. And I think one of the things that I should say to the Weizmann management, I think that I'm, as I said, I'm new to the TTO of Weizmann, and I think I'm the first guy that had a TTO that is not a lawyer, but coming from industry. And I think it's important, because I don't think of my role as something that is to make contracts and make the best contracts, but how to make it into companies. And this is something that needs to be changed, I think, across the interface between academic and life and the industry. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, historically, Israel still doesn't have a big pharma industry. So usually in the tech industry, you had the middle management all over the place. So you can pick up people that has a vast experience in tech and tell them how would you like to, and some of them had entrepreneurship inside them and they want to take it on. In pharma, we lack this middle management because there's no big pharmas, but the BioConvergence comes to our hand to help us right now, because right now you don't need a pharma guy necessarily. You need someone that can look at different disciplines and know how to run a business. And another thing that helps was, I think, that historically there was a big difference between what's called therapeutic and the diagnostic. These borders are now blurred. When personalized medicine came in, and you don't know if diagnostic and therapeutic, where this starts and when this ends, because if you're doing some tests that define which drugs to take, is it diagnostic or therapeutic? And diagnostic, there is an industry in Israel. There are companies of med device and diagnostics, so there are management there.
So Yanai, it sounds like you made this transition as a personal achievement, beginning an academic scientist, as an academic scientist, but found your way into entrepreneurship all on your own. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So it's a very interesting question. I think in a way, when you're trained as a graduate student and then as a postdoc to become a PI, what you're basically being trained for is very similar to the missions that an entrepreneur then has when he or she wants to start a company. When you learn the language of raising money in academia, you learn how to tell a story in a grant application. in order to tell the story to investors, you need to learn a different language. But it's a very similar process. Find the angle, find the way to tell the bigger picture story from the scientific details you have in control and you're going to act on. So I think in many ways, the missions of PIs and the missions of entrepreneurs and CEOs of young startups are very similar. Now, if you're hugely successful, you build a huge lab with 100 people, and they work on multiple interesting projects that are all surrounded or surrounding a central theme. If you're a very successful entrepreneur, then you end up with a big company that has multiple products, multiple drugs, or multiple technologies that are kind of revolving around the same concept or the same idea. So in many, many ways, it's different. I think the challenge of moving people from academia to industry and back is basically the challenge of adopting a new language, adopting a new approach. I think the divide, the challenge is mostly cultural. And I think all over the world, the membrane that separates these two compartments becomes more and more permeable. People are moving today between academia, companies, VCs, and back more than ever before.
Yeah, two differences. I agree with what you say. One is that in academia, if you do an experiment, a very complicated experiment, and it fails, it's still a paper sometimes. So it's not a failure in academic life. In the industry, if you're not successful, you're not successful. And the other thing is, I think as an entrepreneur, as an academic, a successful academic person, he's going through a straight road, that he was very good student at his high school, and then a brilliant undergraduate, then he was a very good postdoc, and so on. As an entrepreneur, you can be very good and you still get no from all the VCs. So it's a different experience, you have to adjust. And if you're a good professor, your road is paved all the time, you're successful. So you're going from one success to the other. And this is a new way that you need to be trained yourself, that a no from money guy, it doesn't mean anything, but that you need to go to another guy. It doesn't mean that your work is not good.
It's never easy to learn a new language, but I actually want to go back to what Ofer said. Somebody's writing a review and is writing there behind the curtain of anonymity that you're stupid and you don't know what you're doing. And then you go home, you have a drink, and you write the grant again, and you write the paper again. It is very similar to getting the slap in the face of the VC that says no to you. The exciting stuff is the ability of a smart scientist to look at a failed study and pivot. You need to to see and say, oh, we had plan A, we cried because it failed, but hey, there is another amazing opportunity here. Let's act upon it. And actually, there are many studies that show that successful startups pivoted once or twice. So I think it is very, very similar. Take your results seriously. And if your results make you change your plan, act on it. This is true for academia, and this is true for companies.
So I would say that the basic ingredient to even choose a career in science is the management of failure. Because whether you're an academic where your currency is publication, eventual tenure, the industry, the currency is different. So I'm going to use an economic analogy. Your currency is the ability to raise money to continue to fund your dream. However, we are all grounded with data. And data set you free one way or another. Negative data, you pivot. You have to pivot because you're forced. And I like that analogy. It's very true. So I think the management of failure is a trait, a characteristic of any scientist, whether you're in the academic world or the industrial world. Leah, let me invite you into this conversation as well.
So I think the incubator program is a great way of dealing with that very scarce resource. So what we do to deal with the lack of experience in industry science, we have a management team that together we bring many years of experience in the industry, including interacting with global companies and global arms that enabled us to learn what the industry really wants to see, how we need to develop these programs. And we are actually mentors of the people who come into our companies. So we try to identify what are the specific skills that we need for each and every company. Because we deal with very innovative science, we need scientists, pure scientists, and if we don't understand the science very deeply, we will not be able to develop our therapies properly. So that's how we combine, on the one hand, the science, and on the other hand, the industrial knowledge of development.
So David, I would ask you a similar question. How do you identify the leadership of an enterprise that can translate that those scientific discoveries and make them into for-profit enterprises?
That's a very good question, and unfortunately not a very easy one to answer. We have excellent science in Israel, but as you mentioned, the number of experienced executives in the field of biotech development is not very large. I mean, we all started as scientists early in our careers, yet the ability of finding the people who have the combination of financial understanding, who understands what drug development is, who know how to address the regulatory challenges and the operational requirements, the number of these people is not very large in the biotech arena, which is a different scenario from what we have, for instance, in the high-tech industry here in Israel. Therefore, the ability to identify those individuals, either in Israel or bring them back abroad, and of course, finding the right people actively, and it takes time to identify them and to bring them in, but we do believe that this is the right move at the right time for a company, and therefore, and also maybe one more important factor is, as Leah has mentioned before, that mentoring and having the experienced executives serve in different roles as advisors, as chairmen, or taking another role as CEO is really maximizing on the experience already gained, both in its success and avoiding the mistakes made, that will enable the next generation of Israeli biotech companies to flourish and succeed.
So I want to turn now to economics, because ultimately, and I want to start with Anya, on behalf of the country, I imagine the Israel Innovation Authority must be thinking about return on investment. So you're selective about what you invest in. You have a philosophy, as you describe your BioConvergence philosophy, which I think is actually where all of science is going. These cross-fertilization of different disciplines to be collaborative, to develop some form of product. But how do you think about return on investment, and in what time frame?
Okay, so the most important thing I have to say, our role or our success is not financial. We don't invest $500 million US and expect to make return on investment. Our mission is economic. We want to build a very successful Israeli industry. And we want this successful economic industry to be inclusive, to include all parts of a population, and to be sustainable over time. So when we invest money, as I said, our policy is to take risks, not because we want to make more. We actually don't take an upside. So we give money to encourage risk-taking. If the project fails, if the company fails, if the applied research fails, they don't have to repay us. If it succeeds, we get our money back through royalty of sales. We don't take upside, we don't take shares, we don't sit on boards, and gratefully, we don't manage anything as a government. So our single role is to encourage, to catalyze the economic development. And our role is to take care of market failures. So it's not just scientific invention. It's not just developing amazing technology and validating technology. It's how can you focus on areas where you can actually build a complete company, because then you affect the economy. So for each R&D, exceptional R&D person in this company, maybe 3 to 5 times more people are involved in the successful high-tech company or life sciences company. And this is how the economic impact of such technologies can be great for the country. So this is our role, how to create such economic impact. And this is where our return of investment is.
So Ofer, I ask you the same question as Weizmann Institute. How do you think about return on investment as a fundamental precept to make that investment?
Well, I think we are more close to the Israeli authority than to VCs in this sense, because even success for the Weizmann Institute is the time frame for that is pretty long. And we're talking about life sciences. It's maybe shorter for companies in different areas, but life science project, it started the Weizmann and we write a patent on it and you start commercializing it one way or another. It takes, I don't know, 10, 12 years until we see whether it's success or not. So the time constant is very long. And what we see, and I agree completely with Anya here, that if there is more of environment of people who are in industry, and one of the aspects of creating an industry, that's what I referred to before, that you have a lot of people that grow in industry. So they have both aspects of science and management, and then can come in turn and take new projects from the university and build new companies. That will be our return on investment. Of course, the Weizmann wants to see at the end royalties coming in and things like that, which is always nice to have. But it has a lot of patience in this. We don't, good project that I start right now, probably my successor will see the fruits of it. It's not going to be me. So it's someone that will replace me, will see you, or my failures. But the main asset we'll gain is people in the industry that can build and take projects that in turn will even direct researchers in areas that are new, hot, and build the infrastructure of what was referred to many times here as BioConvergence. Even today, you see in Weizmann Institute, people from computer science working in biology and people from chemistry working with us. It's the whole differentiation between faculties is disappearing quietly. And I think this will be the advanced science as well, not advance only the industry.
We have just a few minutes remaining, so I'm just going to give everybody a chance to, where do you see Israel's role in the life sciences industry in 10 years? Let me start with David. Let's go backwards. David was but let me ask you, what's your aspiration 10 years from now? And it's the same question for everybody. And we'll conclude this panel discussion with your vision.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I do hope that we will see a number of fully integrated biotech companies who are covering the whole landscape of development, research, manufacturing, and commercialization of their products. I do believe that the unique combination we have here in Israel of strong life sciences, very good medical research, and a very strong computer AI-based industry will converge together and lead these companies, future companies. Some of them are probably starting as already as startups, and we may even be talking about them today. But I'm sure that in a decade, we will see more companies, more diversity, and a lot of cooperation. As mentioned throughout our panel today, understanding that working with scientists, companies, service providers, and collaborators throughout the world is really the key for maximizing what each of us can bring to the table on its own.
Leah, what's your view?
I want to add on to what David said. When I express my thoughts about the accelerator, which I work in, I see it as a great school for drug discovery and drug development. So it's not only identifying these programs that we're working on in the present. Hopefully every person coming out from this accelerator will one day work as a manager in a more developed company with a future beyond what we see at the moment. So I think we try to be one step in building the basis for a growing industry, combining the different disciplines, but putting the patient at first line. The patient is our goal, treating the patient. So wherever the programs come from, hopefully we are developing the next generation of therapies and the next generation of managers that will be able to develop those therapies.
And where do you see all of this going in 10 years? What's your dream?
So Israel is actually a fairly small country. And if I think about the two last points that we discussed, the economics and the talent, and I look at the enterprises that I started, and I look at the more than 100 million that I raised over the last few months without flying, sitting on my couch in Tel Aviv and raising the money through Zoom. And I look at the talent we recruited, a lot of it is not in Israel. We need to realize that the key for success is being able to work closely with funds and talent all over the world. So if we work with WuXi in China and with investors in Silicon Valley, so we need to wake up at 6 o'clock Israel time to have a conference call with the team in China and stay up until midnight to have a conference call with the investors in California. That's the key for success. We cannot plan seriously to have all the talents and all the funds and all the CROs here in Israel, and we need to find good ways to integrate them. And I think eventually at the end of the day, an Israeli company would be a company where the English spoken at the board meeting is spoken with a heavy Israeli accent.
I came to the Weizmann basically out of, I should say, idealism. After 25 years in industry, I decided to take a different role. And because I think that Israel needs to build this industry. And I think it's the right time right now to build this industry. And I think Israel can build such an industry of life science, and this is the right time. And I'm sure in 10 years it's going to be a difference. It's similar to what tech been 20 years ago. This same with the last remarks both by I and Julian, that science has no borders, yet it has a base And if the industry has a base here with scientists all over the place, is different than it, and this is the way it should be. And Israel has a great opportunity because it has a great entrepreneurship culture and a great culture of mixing different disciplines. That's all the great Israeli invention came from taking discipline from taking one discipline and apply it to the other. And I think this is the right time to do it with the medical industry right now.
So I have a very specific vision here. First of all, we've just started building a global bioconvergence alliance. We invite all countries who want to work with us to change the future of medicine, to make medicine accessible and cheaper and available. And we already have a few countries working with us. And I want to see 10 years from now, there's a huge alliance working together. And specifically for Israel, 10 years from now, when they're going to say, okay, where are the world leading locations for bioconvergence clusters? Where are the most innovative bioconvergent clusters? So Israel is going to be one of the three. I don't know who the other three are the other two are going to be, but we're going to be one of the three. So very specific vision here.
So maybe I'll have the last word as the panel chair. One of the things that, in my career, I started in big pharma. I did my postdoc in chemistry. I did the traditional educational preparation, always expecting to be a professor. But in the last minute, by chance, I entered, big pharma and kind of learned the tools of the trade at big pharma. So you have a blank sheet we have a blank sheet because I'm now an Israeli entrepreneur myself. We have a blank sheet and we have all of the experiences of the past. We can always study history and we can accelerate all these experiences just the way we accelerated the discovery of the identification of SARS-CoV-2 and the development of a vaccine within 1 year. That was, a global international effort. And Yanai, I love what you said. Science has no borders. Of course, people have nationalities and affiliations, but I completely agree with you that, knowledge and science really has no borders. So I love that spirit that I think is very palpable and very attractive in the Israeli ecosystem. So I want to thank all of my co-panelists and WuXi again, who helped set up this conversation. And I hope it's helpful to others tuning in. Thank you all.